This is a quick little recommendation of a book that I read as a teen. And it was one of the first books that I finished. It was a little book that was lent to me by a friend of mine while I was going to Canterbury Arts High School. Before then, I was mostly reading things for school, like Shakespeare, obviously. That other book that I recommended, which was The Butterfly Revolution, which told me a little bit about some philosophers, and this was a philosopher. So entering my teenage angst years, I believe this was around the age of 14 that I first read this. This is a perfect book, and it has a very simple idea that it tackles in a very fun way. So here's my rereading of it and review of it here. Candide by Voltaire is a short novella of about 100 some pages, 120 pages that are easy to get through. And it's a fun little parable, basically. Voltaire was a very famous writer in his time. He was a philosopher and very influential during the Enlightenment. Apparently, he came up with the story that he had heard from Newton's niece of the apple falling on Newton's head and how he discovered gravity. So he kind of embellished that story, the famous story. Among other things, he wrote like 80 books or so. He was a philosopher, but he was certainly as famous as Dickens in his time. He was born French and in 1694, and he lived in England, and he learned English and published even in English. He was very controversial. He was almost imprisoned several times over a number of books, one of which was like one that he wrote in English, criticizing, comparing England to France, basically, and criticizing secular religion, like he thought religions are brought together with the common goal of commerce. So anyway, this book, Candide, he wrote apparently late in life, 65. He was 65 when he wrote it, Candide or the Optimist. And there's some lovely illustrations in here. Illustrations by Sylvain Sauvage. They have a little spiel about him. But really I want to focus on the book and the topic that he covers. Questioning basically a philosophy by, Lipstick? Let's see, I wonder if it mentions it here. There was a philosopher of the time. He posited that basically this is the best of all possible worlds. All the bad things in the world, war, famine, all sorts of atrocities, the things we do to each other, the things we do to the environment, the things that happen to us, earthquakes, these are all part of the greater good. And they're all kind of meant to be. And Voltaire, through a series of instances of all these bad things that happen to Candide, our main character, puts that, the question to the test, that phrase to the test. Do things like all accumulate to the best of all possible worlds. So Candide starts out and he's living in a castle. He's got the best life you could possibly have. He's in love with Cunegonde, who's like this beautiful girl, and he gets caught by her father, the king, and gets thrown out with many kicks in his rear end. which is a recurring theme because every time that's mentioned, Voltaire, to comedic effect, brings up the fact that he's been kicked in the ass out of the castle. So it's like it's a very humorous book. It's certainly laugh out loud. It's very funny. And he's also got a philosopher that in this that he Candide lives by his phrase, which is everything's the best of all possible worlds. And then at one point, Pangloss, the philosopher, he's killed, but then he's found out later. So there's like all these things. Things happen very, very quickly. So let's go through some of them. So how Candide was brought up in a noble castle and he was expelled from the same, and then he goes to war with the Bulgarians. Then he gets thrown out of there. Dr. Pangloss, I forget where he gets killed. I think it's at the Inquisition. So he's just going from one freaking thing to another. Auto de fe, that's like a burning at the stake. So there's earthquakes, all these bad things. The Grand Inquisitor, just one incident after another. So there's no sense like listing everything because there's too many, and it's actually hard to keep track of so many things that happen. Voltaire just kind of like goes through all these things, just makes it entertaining, is having fun telling a story because it's a very entertaining story and it's fun and it's quick. And at the end, like most everybody's still somehow alive, and it works out that he does marry Cunegonde. A bit of an irony because by the end she's somehow not as attractive, and so he's kind of like that's one more reason that by the time he actually like wins her love over and he's kind of on the hook with her, he doesn't find her attractive anymore, and which is just another funny thing. And then the whole thing ends with this famous line. Okay, so there we go. So all events are linked up in this best of all possible worlds. For if you had not been expelled from the noble castle by hard kicks in your backside for love of Miss Cunegonde, if you had not been clapped into the Inquisition, if you had not wandered about America on foot, if you had not stuck your sword in the barren, if you had not lost all your sheep from the land of El Dorado, you would not be eating candied citrons and pistachios here. "'Tis well said," replied Candide, "but we must cultivate our gardens." So that line, "we must cultivate our gardens," essentially means that maybe the road to happiness is to just focus on the small things and keep yourself busy. What's that phrase, idle minds or idle hands, something evil things, So I think like just keeping yourself busy, working on yourself, working in the small community and your family is the solution to life's problems, to the questions and ethics that are out there in the world. And maybe the troubles begin by exploring so much and by encountering so many different cultures and different beliefs and different philosophies that clash. And perhaps that's like maybe it's a question that Voltaire had to himself, because he questioned many things politically and philosophically throughout his life. To recap, it just essentially the whole thing is a comedic adventure Very, very funny of Candide just going through experience from experience and seeing the most atrocious things, the terrible things that happen to his friends, and to him questioning whether this is truly the best of all possible worlds. Is everything that bad that happens to us actually a good thing because we survive merely by surviving? You know, should we question all these things that happen to us? And in the end, Candide realizes that we must just cultivate our garden. Yeah, it's a great little book, and I highly recommend it because it's a classic of world literature. It's easy to get through. You could probably get through it like 1 or 2 sittings at most. I hope you had a fun little insight into that. There's not much to it. It's just kind of a reading experience to read the mishaps of Candide and the philosophy that it questions. So let me know what you think. I'm sure you found other things that I just kind of maybe glossed over, but it's an introductory and it's an enjoyable book, and hope you enjoyed it too. See you next time.